She ran a school, not because she had a title, not because anyone voted for her, not because she was the nicest or the smartest or the most talented. She ran it because she decided she did. Regina George is fictional, but the psychology behind how she operated, completely uncomfortably real. And today, we're not here to cancel her. We're not here to defend her either. We're here to do something far more useful. We're going to understand her, because buried inside Regina George's ruthless, calculated, occasionally monstrous playbook is a set of principles about power, perception, and human psychology that most people will never be taught, but everyone around you already knows. So let's get into it. Welcome or welcome back. If this is your first time here, we take pop culture, we flip it over, and we look at what's underneath. The psychology, the power dynamics, the uncomfortable truths, and Regina George is one of the richest case studies we could ever ask for. Let's break her down. Here's the first and most foundational thing Regina George understood that most people don't. Reality doesn't matter as much as perception. Think about it. Regina wasn't the smartest girl in school. She wasn't the most talented. She wasn't even particularly kind, which is usually what we're told makes someone well-liked. By every conventional metric, she shouldn't have been the most powerful person at North Shore High, but she was, completely and totally, because Regina understood something that politicians, CEOs, and social architects have understood for centuries. If you control how people see you, you control how they treat you. And if you control how they treat you, you control the room. Regina curated her image with the precision of a marketing campaign. The way she dressed, the people she associated with, the table she sat at, the things she chose to laugh at, and the things she chose to dismiss. Every single detail was a carefully constructed signal that said, I am the standard. Measure yourself against me. And people did. The lesson isn't to be fake. The lesson is to be intentional. Most people drift through life letting others form whatever impression they want. Regina actively managed the narrative, and that is a form of power available to absolutely everyone. Let's talk about one of Regina's most quietly genius moves. She made people come to her. Think about the burn book. Think about the plastics lunch table. Think about the way she distributed compliments, rarely, unpredictably, and always just enough to keep people hungry for the next one. Regina George understood supply and demand better than most economics professors. When something is rare, we want it more. When approval is freely given, it loses its value. But when the most powerful person in the room withholds their validation, doles it out strategically, unpredictably, it becomes the thing everyone is quietly working to earn. Regina kept her approval scarce, so that receiving it felt like an achievement, and people who feel like they've earned something will work twice as hard to keep it. This is why people chased Regina rather than the other way around. She never lowered herself to pursue anyone's validation because she had engineered an environment where everyone else was too busy pursuing hers. The takeaway isn't cruelty, it's this. Stop giving away your energy freely to people who haven't earned it. Scarcity of your genuine attention and approval is not coldness, it's value. The Burn Book. On the surface, it looks like a mean girl's hobby, but look closer and you'll see something much more calculated. Regina George was an information broker. She collected secrets, weaknesses, and social ammunition on everyone around her. And she understood that knowing something about someone that they don't want known is one of the oldest forms of leverage in human history. Now, we're not here to advocate for burn books, obviously, but here's the real psychological principle underneath it. The people who pay attention win. Most people walk through their social environments completely on autopilot. They don't notice what makes the people around them insecure. They don't pick up on what someone is quietly desperate for. They don't store information. They don't connect dots. Regina did all of it, constantly. She knew who liked who, she knew who was insecure about what, she knew exactly which buttons to press and when to press them. And in a world where most people are barely paying attention to anyone but themselves, that level of social awareness is genuinely powerful. Strip away the malice, and what you have is this: know your environment. Know the people in it. Pay attention, because information, real, nuanced human information, is always currency. Here's something that gets overlooked in every conversation about Regina George. Nobody gave her that throne. There was no election, no application process, no authority figure who handed Regina George social dominance over North Shore High. She simply behaved as though she already had it, and eventually everyone agreed. This is one of the most uncomfortable truths about power structure structures in any environment. Whether it's a high school, a workplace, a social circle, or a boardroom, power is to a startling degree self-appointed. Not always, not in every context, but more often than we'd like to admit, the person who ends up leading the room is simply the person who was most convinced they should. Regina didn't wait for permission. She didn't wait until she felt ready or until someone validated her right to lead. She just started leading, and confidence, real or performed, has a gravitational pull that most people unconsciously follow. There's a version of this that's completely healthy and available to all of us. Stop waiting for someone to give you the seat. Stop waiting to feel qualified enough, experienced enough, ready enough. In most rooms, the person setting the tone is simply the person who decided to be that person. Here's a Regina George move that sounds counterintuitive until you really sit with it. She was perfectly comfortable being hated. Think about this. The burn book gets exposed. The whole school turns on her. Girls are rioting in the hallways. Regina's reputation should have been destroyed. But it wasn't. Not really. Because here's what Regina instinctively understood and what most people never figure out. In the economy of social attention, being talked about is almost always more powerful than being liked. The opposite of power is not being disliked. The opposite of power is being irrelevant. Regina was never irrelevant. Even when people hated her, they were thinking about her, talking about her, obsessing over her. She occupied mental real estate in everyone around her, whether they wanted her there or not. And that kind of presence, that unavoidable, inescapable, rent-free in your head quality, is not something you can manufacture by being agreeable and palatable and easy to like. It comes from being fully, unapologetically yourself, even when, especially when, that self is polarizing. The people who try to be universally liked become universally forgettable. The people who commit fully to who they are, sharp edges and all, become impossible to ignore. Regina George was impossible to ignore. Even at her lowest, she was still the most talked about person in the school. There is something to learn there. Okay, this is the one that ties everything together. If you look at every single thing Regina George did, every move, every calculation, every performance of effortless superiority, there's one thread running through it all. She never seemed to need anything from anyone. Not validation, not reassurance, not permission, not even basic human warmth. She projected a self-sufficiency so complete that it almost didn't seem human. And here's why that's so psychologically potent. Need is readable. When people can sense that you need something from them, their approval, their attention, their acceptance, it shifts the power dynamic immediately and completely. They become the one with something to give. You become the one hoping they'll give it. Regina never put herself in that position. She gave the impression of someone who had everything she needed internally, which meant that anything she chose to offer others, her time, her attention, her approval, felt like a gift rather than a transaction. Now, the real Regina George was deeply insecure. The movie tells us this. The calories obsession, the constant need to dominate, the way she dismantles anyone who threatens her position. These are not the behaviors of someone who is truly secure. But here is the painful, complicated truth. Even performed self-sufficiency works. Even the appearance of not needing anything changes how people treat you, because humans are wired to value what seems hard to get and to take for granted what seems freely available. The healthier version of this, the version worth actually internalizing, is doing the real internal work until you genuinely need less from outside sources, building the kind of relationship with yourself where external validation is nice but not necessary. That is actual power, not Regina's hollow, brittle performance of it. The real thing. And the real thing is available to you. So here's the final word on Regina George. She was not a good person. The things she did were manipulative and cruel and caused real damage to the people around her. The movie is very clear about this. We are also very clear about this. But Regina George got to the top of every room she walked into, and she didn't do it accidentally. She did it by understanding, however darkly and however wrongly she applied that understanding, a set of truths about human psychology that most people never confront. Perception shapes reality. Scarcity creates value. Information is power. Confidence is self-appointed. Presence beats likability, and neediness repels the very things we're hoping it will attract. You don't need the burn book. You don't need the cruelty. You don't need to dismantle everyone around you to rise. But you do need to stop shrinking, stop auditioning, stop waiting for someone to hand you a crown that was always yours to put on yourself. Regina George walked into every room already wearing hers. The question is, what's stopping you from doing the same?